This is the most emotional story you'll hear today. A story that will make you rethink respect, honor, and the true meaning of brotherhood. Because sometimes, when you think you're alone in this world, you discover there are angels disguised as demons ready to fight for you. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Harold Martinez, an 89-year-old Korean War veteran, entered Miami's most expensive restaurant. His hands trembled slightly as he held the yellowed envelope he'd carried for more than 70 years. Today was the anniversary of his best friend Tommy's death, who died in his arms in the frozen trenches of Seoul. And Harold had promised that every year, on this same day, he would celebrate Tommy's life at the finest restaurant he could afford. Harold wore his only good suit, the same one he'd worn for 15 years. The pants were slightly worn, the tie had some permanent stains, but he had spent 2 hours getting ready. Because today wasn't about him. It was about honoring the memory of a hero who never came home. The maitre d' led him to a table in the back of the restaurant. Harold ordered the simplest dish on the menu and a glass of water. When the waiter asked if he wanted wine, Harold smiled shyly and said water was fine. The truth is, he had saved for 3 months just to afford that meal. While waiting for his food, Harold opened the yellowed envelope and took out a faded photograph. It was him and Tommy, two 18-year-old boys, smiling at the camera days before shipping out to Korea. Harold gently touched Tommy's face in the photo and murmured a silent prayer. That's when Jonathan Blackwell entered the restaurant. Jonathan was CEO of one of America's largest tech companies. At 45, he had accumulated a fortune of $3 billion. He was in the middle of an important call when he spotted Harold sitting alone, looking at that old photograph. Jonathan gestured to the maitre d' and whispered something in his ear. The maitre d' looked uncomfortable but nodded reluctantly. Jonathan ended his call and walked directly to Harold's table. "Excuse me," Jonathan said loudly, interrupting Harold's intimate moment with his memories. "I have a very important meeting in 10 minutes with Japanese investors. I need this table." Harold looked up, confused. "I'm sorry, sir, but I just ordered my food." "Look, Grandpa," Jonathan cut him off with pure disdain, "this place isn't exactly for people like you. Maybe you'd be better off finding somewhere more suited to your budget." The entire restaurant fell silent. All eyes turned to this embarrassing scene. Harold felt his cheeks burn with shame. His hands trembled more intensely as he put the photo back in the envelope. I already paid for my food, sir," Harold murmured, his voice barely audible. Jonathan laughed loudly, a cruel laugh that echoed through the restaurant. "Really? And how much did you pay? $50? 100? I spend more than that on a single bottle of wine." He turned to the maitre d'. "Refund whatever this old man paid and escort him out." Harold stood slowly, his weak legs shaking. He held the envelope against his chest and began walking toward the exit. Silent tears ran down his withered face. 70 years of service to his country, 70 years of dignity, were destroyed in a matter of minutes. At the restaurant door, Harold stopped and turned around. With a voice that carried decades of pain and disappointment, he said, "Sir, I served my country for 4 years in Korea. I lost my best friend in that war. Today is the anniversary of his death, and I just wanted to honor his memory with a decent meal. May God forgive you for your cruelty." Jonathan didn't even turn around. He was too busy texting on his phone, already completely forgetting the incident. Harold walked out into the rain and trudged 3 blocks until he found a bench in the town square. He sat there, soaked and humiliated, holding Tommy's photo. "I'm sorry, brother," he whispered to the picture. "I tried." What Jonathan Blackwell didn't know was that 3 people in the restaurant had filmed the entire scene. One was Maria Santos, a waitress from another restaurant who was there on her day off. Another was David Chen, a local journalist. And the third was Sofia Rodriguez, a veteran nurse who immediately recognized the discreet military ribbons on Harold's jacket. Sofia approached Jonathan before he sat down. "You just humiliated a war hero," she said, her voice trembling with contained fury. Jonathan barely looked up from his phone. "Sorry, but I'm busy here." That man has more honor in his pinky finger than you'll ever have in your entire pathetic life, Sophia continued. And you're going to find that out very soon. Meanwhile, Maria had already posted the video on her social media with the caption, "Billionaire scumbag humiliates 89-year-old war veteran on anniversary of best friend killed in Korea. Share so everyone can see who Jonathan Blackwell really is." David Chen was already writing the story that would change everything. But he did something more important. He called his brother Marcus, who worked as a mechanic and had deep connections in the biker community. "Marcus," David said on the phone, "I need you to spread a story. An 89-year-old veteran just got publicly humiliated by a billionaire piece of shit." The old man was trying to honor the memory of his best friend who died in the war. Marcus Chen had known Miami's motorcycle community for 20 years. He knew exactly who to call first. By 8 p.m., Maria's video had already been viewed by more than 50,000 people. People were absolutely furious. The comments were demanding justice for Harold and real consequences for Jonathan. But who was really paying attention was James "Iron Wolf" Morrison, president of the Miami Hells Angels chapter. Iron Wolf was 62 and a Vietnam veteran himself. When he saw that video, something inside him broke and ignited at the same time. Iron Wolf immediately called his vice president, Carlos "Thunder" Mendez. "Carlos, did you see the video that's going viral?" "I saw it, brother. My blood is fucking boiling. I want you at the clubhouse in 1 hour. And call every single chapter in Florida. We have serious work to do tonight." Within 2 hours, more than 200 bikers had gathered at the Miami Hells Angels headquarters. There weren't just Hells Angels members there. There were also veterans from other motorcycle clubs, independent riders, and even some retired cops and firefighters who had served in the military. Iron Wolf climbed onto the makeshift platform and showed the video to everyone present. The silence in that room was absolutely deadly. When the video ended, a thunderous roar of indignation shook the walls. "Brothers," Iron Wolf began, his deep voice reverberating through the packed room, "this man is one of ours. Harold Martinez, first sergeant, served 4 years in Korea. Lost his best friend in combat. And today, on the anniversary of that hero's death, some coward billionaire publicly humiliated him like a piece of trash." The murmurs of anger intensified throughout the crowd. "But we're not just about anger," Iron Wolf continued, his voice rising. "We're about honor. We're about respect. We're about taking care of our veterans when nobody else will. So tonight, we're going to show Harold Martinez and the entire world what it means to be a real family." Carlos Thunder stood up from the front row. "What do you have in mind, Iron Wolf?" "First, we're going to find Harold. Second, we're going to learn everything about his life and what he needs. Third, we're going to show him he's not alone in this world anymore. And fourth," Iron Wolf paused, a dark smile crossing his withered face, "we're going to teach Mr. Jonathan Blackwell a lesson about respect that he'll carry to his grave." The crowd exploded in approval, their roars echoing through the night. Meanwhile, Harold had returned to his small one-bedroom apartment on the rough side of town. He had lived there for 10 years, ever since his wife Dorothy had passed away. The apartment was simple but spotlessly clean. On the living room wall hung a small collection of military photos and medals on a modest wooden shelf. Harold sat in his worn armchair and looked again at Tommy's photo. "You know something, brother," he said to the picture, "I think I'm getting too old for this world. People don't respect anything anymore. Maybe it's time for me to join you." He had no idea that outside his building, Marcus Chen was standing with 3 other bikers, having tracked down Harold's address through Sophia's connections at the Veterans Hospital where she worked. The next morning, Harold woke to the sound of engines. Many, many engines. He approached his window and couldn't believe what he was seeing. The entire street was completely blocked by motorcycles. Hundreds of them. Harleys, Indians, Triumphs, all polished chrome gleaming in the morning sun. And the bikers were all standing in perfect military formation, like soldiers awaiting orders from their commander. Harold went down the stairs slowly, still in his pajamas and old robe. When he opened the building's front door, Iron Wolf approached and respectfully removed his helmet. "Mr. Martinez," Iron Wolf said, his voice respectful and solemn, "my name is James Morrison. I'm a Vietnam veteran and president of the Miami Hells Angels. May I have a few minutes of your time, sir?" Harold was completely speechless. He looked at the massive crowd of leather-clad bikers and then back at Iron Wolf. I don't understand. What could you possibly want with me?" "First," Iron Wolf said, "we want to apologize. Apologize for you being treated with such disrespect yesterday. Apologize for having to go through the humiliation alone. And apologize for taking so long to find you." Harold's eyes filled with tears. You all came here because of me?" "Mr. Martinez," Iron Wolf continued, his voice carrying deep emotion, "you are a hero. You served your country with honor and courage. And yesterday, when that piece of shit humiliated you, he didn't just humiliate you. He humiliated all of us. He humiliated Tommy's memory. He humiliated everything we fought for and everything some of our brothers died for." Carlos Thunder stepped forward carrying a custom black leather jacket. On the back was embroidered in gold thread, "Harold Tommy's brother Martinez, Honorary Hells Angels, Korea Hero, Forever Family." "If you'll accept it," Iron Wolf said, "we want you to be our honorary brother. We want you to know you'll never be alone again in this world. And we want you to come with us on a little trip." Harold put on the jacket with trembling hands. It fit perfectly on his frail shoulders. The weight of it felt like armor, like protection he'd never had. Where are we going?" Iron Wolf's smile was both gentle and dangerous. "Back to that restaurant, brother. We have a very important conversation to have." Harold climbed onto the back of Iron Wolf's massive Harley Davidson. At 89 years old, this was the first time in his life he had ever ridden a motorcycle. And as they roared through the streets of Miami, followed by 500 bikers in perfect formation, Harold felt something he hadn't felt in decades. He felt like he belonged somewhere. He felt protected. He felt like he had a family again. At the restaurant, Jonathan Blackwell was having another expensive business lunch when the sound began. First it was just a distant rumble. Then it got louder. And louder. And louder. Until the windows of the restaurant were literally vibrating. The maitre d' ran to the window and went completely pale. "Mr. Blackwell," he stammered, I think you really need to see this." Jonathan stood up irritated and looked out the window. What he saw made him choke on his overpriced wine. 500 motorcycles were parked in perfect formation in front of the restaurant. The street was completely blocked in both directions. And from each motorcycle, a leather-clad biker was dismounting. They organized themselves in military-style lines, like an army preparing for battle. Iron Wolf helped Harold off the bike with gentle care. Harold now wore his honorary Hells Angels jacket over the same humble suit from yesterday. But today, he wasn't alone. Today, he had 500 brothers standing behind him. They entered the restaurant in a solemn procession that seemed to last forever. Iron Wolf led the way, Harold walked proudly at his side, and 500 bikers followed in perfect silence. The entire restaurant fell into absolute, terrified silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Iron Wolf walked directly to Jonathan's table, where the billionaire was visibly shaking with fear. "Mr. Blackwell," Iron Wolf said, his voice deadly calm but loaded with menace, "I believe you've already met Harold Martinez." Jonathan tried to speak, but no words came out of his trembling mouth. "Yesterday," Iron Wolf continued, each word like a hammer blow, "you humiliated this man. This war veteran. This American hero. You treated him like garbage because he wasn't wearing a $1,000 suit. You threw him out of here like trash because you thought he wasn't worthy of sharing the same air as you." Harold stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice no longer trembled with shame. It rang with dignity and strength. "Mr. Blackwell, I didn't come here seeking revenge. I came seeking something you never gave me yesterday, basic human respect." Jonathan finally found his voice, though it cracked with terror. I didn't know. I'm so sorry. Didn't know what? Harold asked, his voice getting stronger. Didn't know I was a human being? Didn't know I deserved to be treated with dignity? Or didn't know I had 500 brothers who would ride through hell itself to stand with me? Carlos Thunder approached carrying a thick leather briefcase. Mr. Blackwell, we did some research on you last night. We discovered your company has federal contracts worth over $200 million. Contracts that specifically depend on your public reputation and moral character remaining spotless. Jonathan went even paler, if that was possible. We also discovered, Carlos continued with a cold smile, that you never served a single day for your country. In fact, your daddy paid a hefty bribe to keep you out of the Iraq war draft. While men like Harold were bleeding and dying for your freedom, you were partying at Harvard on daddy's blood money. A murmur of disgust went through the restaurant. Other customers were recording everything with their phones, and several were crying as they watched. Iron Wolf placed his massive hand on Harold's shoulder. Mr. Martinez, what would you like to happen now? The choice is yours, brother. Harold was quiet for a long moment, studying Jonathan's terrified face. Then he smiled, not a smile of cruelty, but a sad, wise smile that carried decades of hard-earned wisdom. I would like to finish my meal. The meal I came here yesterday to eat in honor of my friend Tommy. And I would like Mr. Blackwell to learn something that money can't buy, that wealth without character is just poverty with better clothes. Success without honor is just failure with a bigger bank account. And power without respect for others is just weakness disguised as strength. Iron Wolf gestured to the terrified maitre d'. A table for 601 people, please. Sir, we don't possibly have space for. Then we'll eat in the street, Iron Wolf said with calm authority. Harold, do you mind dining outside with 500 of your new brothers? Harold's smile grew wider and more genuine. Brother, it would be the greatest honor of my life. And that's exactly how the most legendary dinner in Miami history happened. 500 bikers sat on the asphalt in front of that fancy restaurant. They ordered every piece of takeout food available and created the most epic street feast you could imagine. Harold sat in the center of it all, as the guest of honor he always should have been. While they ate, Harold told stories about Tommy and about the war. The bikers shared their own stories of military service, of battles fought, of brothers lost, of coming home to a country that didn't appreciate their sacrifice. And for those precious hours, that street became a sacred place where warriors who had fought for their country finally found the brotherhood they deserved. Jonathan Blackwell watched the entire scene from the restaurant window, his business lunch completely forgotten. His important investors had fled in embarrassment. His phone was buzzing nonstop with calls from his board of directors who had already seen the videos going viral. And he knew that by morning, footage of that incredible street dinner would be on every news channel in America. But the story was far from over. 1 week later, Harold received an unexpected visit. It was Jonathan Blackwell, but this was a completely different man. He wore no tie, his expensive suit was wrinkled, his eyes were red from sleepless nights, and his face showed complete defeat. Mr. Martinez, Jonathan said quietly, may I please come in? Harold studied him for a moment, then stepped aside and invited him into his humble apartment. Jonathan looked around at the small space, at the military medals on the wall, at the faded photos of young soldiers, at the worn armchair where Harold spent his lonely evenings. I lost everything, Jonathan said, his voice breaking completely. My company's board fired me. My wife filed for divorce. My children won't speak to me. Every investor has pulled out. The government canceled all my contracts. My net worth went from $3 billion to almost nothing. And all because... He paused, struggling with tears, all because I never learned what you tried to teach me that day. Harold quietly prepared 2 cups of simple black coffee. And what exactly was I trying to teach you? That real wealth isn't measured in dollars or stock options. That respect can't be purchased with money. That honor has no price tag. And that at the end of your life, it's not your bank balance that matters, it's the lives you touched, the people you helped, the good you did in this world. Harold nodded slowly, handing Jonathan the coffee. And have you learned that now? Jonathan began to sob openly. I learned it too late. I'm 45 years old and I've never done a single thing of real value in my entire life. I never served anyone but myself. I never sacrificed anything for a greater cause. I never had a true friend like you had with Tommy. Harold was silent for a long moment. Then he stood up, walked to his shelf, and picked up Tommy's precious yellowed photograph. You know, Jonathan, Harold said gently, Tommy taught me something important before he died in my arms. He said every man deserves a second chance. That it's never too late to choose to become better than you were yesterday. He handed the photo to Jonathan, who took it with reverent, shaking hands. This photograph stayed with me for 70 years. It reminded me every single day of the promise I made to a dying brother. Maybe it's time for you to make a promise of your own. Jonathan held the photo like it was made of gold. What kind of promise? Promise me you'll spend whatever years you have left honoring the memory of the men who died so you could have the freedom to be cruel. Promise you'll use whatever resources you can rebuild to help veterans like me who have been forgotten. Promise you'll teach your children the lessons about respect and honor that you never learned until now. Jonathan looked down at the faces of those two young soldiers in the photo, Harold and Tommy, 18 years old and smiling, having no idea what horrors awaited them. I promise, Mr. Martinez. I swear on Tommy's memory and on whatever honor I might still have left, I promise. Harold's withered face broke into a genuine smile. Then you can call me Harold, son. 6 months later, Jonathan had lost 90% of his fortune, but he had gained something infinitely more valuable, purpose. He started a foundation for homeless veterans using what money he had left. He worked as a volunteer in VA hospitals, reading to injured soldiers. He spent his days building tiny homes for veterans living on the streets. And every month, without fail, he visited Harold to continue learning about honor, sacrifice, and the true meaning of wealth. Harold lived 5 more beautiful years after that day. And when he finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at 94 years old, more than 1,000 bikers from across the entire country came to pay their respects at his funeral. In the very front row sat Jonathan Blackwell, wearing the honorary Hells Angels jacket that Harold had specifically left to him in his will. At the funeral, Iron Wolf delivered the main eulogy. Harold Martinez taught us something that changed our lives forever. He taught us that heroes never really retire, they just start fighting different kinds of battles. Harold fought in Korea for our freedom. Then he fought here at home for dignity and respect. And in the end, he fought for the soul of a man who had completely lost his way. When they lowered Harold's casket into the ground, every single biker present started their engines in perfect unison. The thunderous roar of over 1,000 motorcycles echoed through that cemetery like a 21-gun salute that would echo in heaven itself. On Harold's headstone, these words are carved in granite: Harold Tommy's brother Martinez. Veteran, hero, brother. He taught us that real wealth comes from the heart, never from the wallet. And right next to the headstone stands a small photo in a weatherproof frame. It shows Harold and Tommy, 2 18-year-old boys in uniform, smiling at the camera with their whole lives ahead of them. They're finally together again, for eternity. This incredible story spread across the entire nation like wildfire. It became a best-selling book. It became an award-winning documentary. It became inspiration for millions of Americans who had forgotten what real honor looks like. Because sometimes, when the world seems to have lost all compassion, angels disguised as demons appear to remind us that true strength comes from protecting the defenseless, honoring the forgotten, and standing up for those who can no longer stand up for themselves. And now, every time a veteran gets disrespected anywhere in America, you can bet your life that somewhere nearby, there are 500 engines ready to roar in defense of honor and brotherhood. Because the Hells Angels aren't just a motorcycle club. They are the guardians of an ancient code that says, no brother gets left behind. No veteran is ever forgotten. And every person, no matter how old or frail or humble, deserves to live and die with dignity intact. Harold Martinez never knew how many lives he changed that rainy Tuesday afternoon at that restaurant. But his lesson continues echoing across America: respect those who came before you, honor those who bled for your freedom, and never forget that true wealth is measured in lives touched, not dollars accumulated. This was the story of Harold Martinez, an ordinary man who became extraordinary not because of money or power, but because of his unbreakable dignity and the brotherhood he found when he needed it most desperately. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all: never underestimate the power of a gentle soul. Because kindness has allies in the most unexpected places, and sometimes those allies ride Harleys and wear leather jackets and are ready to move heaven and earth to protect what's right. If this story just shattered your heart and rebuilt it stronger, you absolutely must hit that like button right now. Because stories like Harold's only reach the people who need them most when you take action. Your like literally saves lives by pushing this message of hope to veterans who feel forgotten, to bullies who need to see consequences, and to millions who've lost faith in human decency. Drop a comment below and tell me, what moment hit you hardest? Have you ever witnessed someone being cruel to an elderly person? Do you know a veteran who deserves this kind of respect? Share their story. I read every single comment, and your words matter more than you know. And if you believe that honor still matters, that respect isn't dead, that brotherhood can triumph over cruelty, then smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell like your life depends on it. Because every week I bring you stories that prove good still conquers evil, that heroes still walk among us, and that sometimes angels wear leather jackets and ride steel horses. But here's what I need you to do right now: share this video with every single person in your life. Your family needs to see what real character looks like. Your friends need to remember that wealth means nothing without honor. Your coworkers need to witness what happens when you mess with someone's grandfather, father, or brother. The war for human dignity is raging right now, and you are my soldiers in this battle. Show me you're ready to fight. Like this video, comment your thoughts, share this story, and subscribe for more content that changes hearts and minds. Because together, we're not just viewers, we're a brotherhood. We're a family. We're the people who still believe that respect matters, that veterans deserve honor, and that bullies should face consequences. Harold Martinez would be proud of every single one of you. Now let's make sure his story reaches every corner of this earth. Hit that like button now.